All right, the Yankees and Mets just wrapped up their first weekend of the 2024 baseball season. And while fans are very much focused on the future and whether or not this will be an interesting baseball summer in the Big Apple, we're going to connect New York's baseball past with the present. And joining me to help me out with that is the author of Mets in Tens and New York Mets all-time All-Stars, as well as the creator of Retro MLB. His name is Brian Wright, and he's here with me now. Brian, what's going on?
Hey, Dexter. Great to be on. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And I want to talk to you about a couple of subjects with the Mets and Yankees. I know you are a big baseball fan. And let's start with this. Let's start talking about Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry, because they're two of the most iconic Mets players from the 80s. Both men are going to have their numbers retired this season. Brian, can you talk about the impact Doc and Darryl had on the Mets in the 1980s and how their legacy still influences the team today?
Yeah, for a long time, we looked back at Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry as, in a sense, players that didn't live up to their potential, which was really just, out of this world. Darryl Strawberry, a top pick in 1980 with unlimited hype around him. And in the case of Gooden, his potential was only heightened after what he did in 1984 and 1985 at 19 and 20 years old. But it's good to see that even though maybe they didn't live up to everything that was thought of them, which may have been a little too much to put on two young players, they are legends for this franchise. I think we have more sympathy for what a young player goes through in that market with that attention. And also we're more understanding of personal backgrounds and mental health challenges that might come with it. Gooden and Strawberry had their moments for sure. What Gooden did in 84 and 85, like you said, 1984 as a 19-year-old, helping to galvanize Mets fans after years of losing last place finishes and really make starts at Shea Stadium events, must-see events, and then followed that up with his season in 1985, which is the best pitching season by any Met, and that's taking into account Tom Seaver and Jacob deGrom. For Darryl Strawberry, still the Mets career leader in homers, a bundle of all-star appearances, a 30-30 season in 1987, a talent you really couldn't look away from. He had just a beautiful swing. And let's face it, they were important pieces to the greatest team in Mets history and the last World Series winner, which is now almost 40 years away. I mean, I certainly haven't seen it. So the legacy is in living up to what those guys did, and that still resonates within the organization.
Oh, it absolutely does. I remember myself growing up a Mets fan. I was a fan of both of those guys and watching them. So excited to see their numbers get retired this season, so it should be good. And then you have to remind Mets fans that it's been almost 40 years since the team last won a World Series.
I don't like hearing it.
I know you don't like hearing it either. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Yankees, because when I talk to Yankee fans, Brian, they tell me they're over the team's current World Series drought. However, the Yankees, they've had periods of World Series droughts throughout their history. How do you see the current team navigating this challenge of a World Series drought compared to past teams? How do you see them navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the same thing from the Yankees fans I know who consider not winning since 2009 something abnormal. And I guess that comes with the territory to having all those rings and having the highest standards. Granted, we have more parity throughout the league and more opportunity to reach the postseason. But in comparison to like the last 60 years, as far as winning percentage goes, they've been a contender. They've had 90 or more victories 8 times since that 09 season. It doesn't help that the Houston Astros have been a virtual dynasty for the last 7 years, a virtual AL dynasty, at least in that respect. When I think about stretches in which the Yankees haven't won, you go back to the 11 years from 1965 through 1975. That often is mentioned as a real dark period in Yankees history. Really 65 through 73, they were basically out of contention every year. That spanned like the end of the Mickey Mantle era and pre-George Steinbrenner. The 18 years from the 1978 title and the 1996 title has plenty of ups and downs under George Steinbrenner. All the hirings and firings, the meddling that George did. Record-wise, the team was pretty good in the 80s, but without the wild card, without the expanded postseason, they never made it after 1981 until 1995. They bottomed out really at the start of the 90s. Before the farm system was built up and were able to then rebuild and obviously go on there, get to the playoffs in 1995 and then win the World Series in 1996 and go on from there. It'll be interesting to see how this current team fares with a lineup that has Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in the middle of it, but without Garrett Cole for the foreseeable future. it'll be interesting to see how the rotation holds up with pitchers who have done well in the past. If Cole can come back and return to that high level, and other starters like Carlos Rodon and Marcus Stroman are solid, some of those question marks will be answered. But the AL East certainly is not easy.
Now, AL East is not easy, but at the time of us recording this, Yankees are off to a 4-0 start. So you're hearing some Yankee fans talk about the drought might be over this year. They're using the C word, championship. We're starting to hear that already. Yes, 4 games in, you're going to hear that from some Yankee fans. I want to go back to the Mets, the current Mets, that is. Pete Alonso, he's approaching breaking the Mets' all-time home run record. How do you see his power-hitting prowess shaping the future of the franchise? And there's been a lot of talk about whether the Mets should keep Pete Alonso or not. Should they keep his bat in Flushing? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think they definitely should. So they obviously, the record, the Mets' all-time home run record is dependent on if the Mets re-sign him for obvious reasons. And like I said, I think they will. I foresee it as a similar situation to what happened with Brandon Nimmo, not exactly in terms of contract amount or length, but rather in terms of, a career-long Met that they want to keep as a career-long Met. And as far as the PR impact, it just seems wrong to have a player who's moving up on the team's home run list at such a rapid pace go elsewhere and potentially be the same impact slugger there. We mentioned Darryl Strawberry, the Mets all-time home run leader right now with 252. He was in New York, Queens specifically, eventually went to the Yankees, but he was in Queens for 8 seasons. The Mets have not had big hitters stay for a long time. When we think of like Mike Piazza, I mean, he was there for, 7+ years or something like that, 98 to 05, much less their entire career. We rarely have players stay for a while. And that has a chance to happen with Pete Alonso, currently at 193 as we're talking on a Sunday evening following the Brewers series. He passed Howard Johnson on Saturday for 4th place and will possibly pass Piazza later this year if he remains healthy. At the rate Pete is going, he has the opportunity to exceed 300, 400, dare we say 500 home runs, all in a Mets uniform. And with that, an opportunity to become really the greatest position player in franchise history. This is a franchise very rich in pitching greatness. Dwight Gooden, Tom Seaver, Jacob deGrom. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily rich in position players for a long period. So Pete has the chance, if the Mets organization does what I expect him to do, really get on that really unique level.
Yeah, he has a chance to do it. We'll see if he stays in Flushing in a Mets uniform. Really great chance to break that record by Darryl Strawberry, who we mentioned before. Last thing for me, Brian, the Yankees, we're going to go back to them. They've got a history of big offseason acquisitions. They've done it many times throughout the franchise's history. How does Juan Soto, who you mentioned earlier, how does his arrival compare to other Yankee sluggers and the impact that they've had over the years when the Yankees acquired them?
Yeah, there's every reason to believe that the result of this trade, that is going to be a huge impact on the lineup. And in a few games, we've seen that really come about against Houston, both at the plate and in the field. As far as the modern era since the advent of free agency, you go back to the signing of Reggie Jackson from Oakland to Baltimore briefly, and then to the Yankees, and being part of back-to-back championship teams, plenty of conflict notwithstanding. You also have to consider Dave Winfield a few years later coming over from the San Diego Padres. Didn't win a World Series, but made a big impact on the Yankees for most of the 1980s. Hideki Matsui, one of the best pre-Ohtani signings out of Japan, who went on to win the World Series MVP in 2009. And then, not in the outfield, but another impact player, certainly a slugger, Alex Rodriguez, moving over from shortstop to third base upon his arrival in New York. Tumultuous for parts of it. Postseason performances, PEDs, certainly among those situations that he had to overcome or deal with, but won 2 MVPs and was instrumental in the 2009 World Series championship team. With that short right field wall at Yankee Stadium and the way Juan Soto can pull the ball, as long as he doesn't get, overly pull happy and overdoes it, it should bode extremely well as he becomes, goes into his free agency after the end of this year. And we'll see if the organization is willing to spend enough to keep him in pinstripes, because if you think about it, he's really a unique case entering free agency after his, I think it's like his age 25 season. this is an opportunity for the Yankees to retain a superstar player in his prime, and there's a very good chance that prime can go about a decade at least. So a lot of incentive to retain a guy of his exceptional caliber.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about that. And Yankee fans are definitely happy about the start he has gotten off to this season. Brian, it's been fun talking about you with baseball's past with the New York teams and also the present and linking them together. It's been really good. Everybody check out the work of Brian Wright. He's the creator of Retro MLB, also the author of New York Mets All-Time All-Stars and Mets in Tens. Check that out. Brian, good connecting with you. We'll do this again down the road.
Sounds great, Dexter. Thank you so much.